The historical lie of the Mongol invasion of Iran. Is what we've heard about Genghis Khan's invasion of Iran really true? Is this story nothing more than a fabricated and distorted narrative? How could the Mongols, as historians claim, have caused such devastation and massacres? Perhaps it is an exaggerated tale to justify the internal defeats and problems of that time. Have we ever considered that Genghis Khan's image may have been intentionally darkened? Why have all historical calamities been attributed to one man and his army? Was this merely a way to simplify history and justify the internal weaknesses of that era? Who has benefited from this portrayal? Perhaps the Mongols had no role in many of these events and were just an excuse to cover up the crises of that period. But ultimately, the fundamental question is, did Genghis Khan really exist? Was he merely a fictional character created over the centuries to explain and interpret historical events? Perhaps Genghis Khan never existed at all, and everything we know about him is nothing more than a historical myth, a myth crafted by various powers throughout history to serve their own agendas.
I am Genghis Khan of the Mongols, an illusion and a historical lie.
In advanced countries, various books have been written on every topic and made available to everyone so that people young and old, educated and less educated, can become familiar with all the affairs and conditions of their land in Iran. Such books, free from lies and the influence of Zionist and imperialist enemies, as well as the decayed thinking of historical neighbors, are very rare, especially those that meet the needs of the youth and align with the realities of growth, the influential power of civilization, and the magnificent culture of our vast country. Undoubtedly, young people have a thirst to know the past and present of their land, but finding a suitable book that provides a new perspective and real awareness is not easy. As a result, a kind of disillusionment and detachment from culture and history is seen in Iran, which is exactly what the enemies of the ancient continent and greater Iran desire. In this video, we have tried to expose the lies, liars, and historical enemies of Iran, so that everyone can gain a new perspective on the grand history of our beloved Iran, whose geographical truth spans Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Iran, and even Eastern Europe. For this purpose, I have tried to write about various and diverse topics, including in the realm of good history. In a world where enemies try to deny us, Iran's culture must build a bridge between the past, present, and future in its path to growth and prosperity, and the historical unity of the inhabitants of this land must, as in the past, remain a thorn in the enemy's eyes. I have written about this forward movement in my article Century of Rejection of Tradition. I would be very pleased with the support of dear readers in uncovering the lies of history. The historical lie of the Mongol invasion of Iran is the third great lie of history, and this lie is also in line with colonial historiography for colonial objectives, and the world historical sociology is the beginning of historical knowledge. With the emergence of Islam and the dissolution of social classes, the influx of peasants to larger towns and villages increased in 1 or 2 centuries after Islam. Cities grew larger and more numerous, much like in the first Islamic century in Baghdad. Caliphs, who were essentially Iranian, were appointed and removed one after another, and new rulers were appointed. These rulers and new city dwellers, lacking the intellectual background and mindset to analyze these transformations, engaged in constant wars. The Baghdadis were quite pleased to fish in troubled waters. The depopulation of villages and the growth of large cities demanded a new need, which was a population of farmers and herders to produce food and raise horses and livestock. Therefore, in the early centuries after Islam, we see kings bringing various tribes such as the Gaz-Tatars and even the Cumans and Bulgars for this purpose, and settling them in the villages of Greater Iran. In most provinces, Iranian and Persian cities were surrounded by newly arrived non-Iranian tribes and villagers. Naturally, in social growth and over 1 or 2 centuries under the ordinary way of life and with Islamic equality, these groups could penetrate the governments, especially since their young men were Used for war, these warriors became commanders in their second half of life, gaining power and influence, and even able to take over governments. Since these tribes and their peoples had no education or knowledge when they entered Iran, they were dependent on educated Iranians and Persian-speaking ministers. Many works about these Persian ministers remain in history. Literacy and knowledge were in the hands of Persian speakers, most of whom lived in cities, therefore, until the Safavid dynasty. Apart from Persian and Arabic, there are no written works or books in other languages. In this context, Iranian thinkers and scholars began to establish various sects for the intellectual and social salvation of Iran and Iranians. These Persian-speaking scholars were completely knowledgeable and wise, but due to the vastness of the country and significant events over several centuries, they lacked overall agreement and military power. They were forced to use their influence to devise strategies to eliminate these new rulers one after another. However, they had a fundamental problem in their way, which was the fatwa of the caliphs, and they needed to rid themselves of Baghdad. But how? They had to do this in a way that did not conflict with the spirit and beliefs of the people, and this had to be done by the same tribes who came to Iran's borders for begging work and occasionally looting. At the time, Shiism and Sunnism were not like today, where the Safavid and Ottoman forces easily fell upon each other's lives and properties or carried out bombings. In modern Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, a new strategy was required to rid themselves of the caliphs of Baghdad. Was it necessary to have a tribe that was the most ignorant, simple-minded, immoral, fearful of thunder, and deeply superstitious and witchcraft practicing? These traits have been described in books about the Mongols. With these definitions, they could fabricate an invasion named the Mongol invasion, just as the last Safavid king was brought by contemporary commanders during the Khwarezmian period. Persian-speaking scholars traveled everywhere seeking what they wanted and found what was not real and was not mentioned in any history or book of the past. Genghis, or Temujin, son of Yesagay, the chief of the Kiyet tribe and one of the Black Tatars, Iranians called all East Asian people Tatars. Since this channel and video are not history itself but only provide a new perspective on history to identify and reveal the lies of Iranian history, we will avoid repeating what is stated in all books. What has been the reality? In the first 2 centuries of Islam, Eastern Iranian tribes were still in a tribal social structure which the Moghustan assembly had established, while in Western Iran they advanced one social stage and were in a religious tribal organization. However, the people faced a problem: the Iranian caliphs in Baghdad, who wanted to see Iran defeated and return to a history that was finished like the Sasanian Empire. For this reason, power in Western Iran was unstable, and easily the Mongol tribes of Iran, who came from Moghustan, moved toward Baghdad to overthrow the Iranian Caliphate. Eastern Iranians easily managed to overthrow the Caliphate, and until the Safavid dynasty and the arrival of colonialism, the religious tribal social structure was implemented in Iran. If there is no mention in Iranian history of the Mongols from the northern deserts of China, it is because these Mongols were taken from Moghustan and the Eastern Iranian people from the 19th century. The northern deserts of China were mistakenly referred to as Mongolia based on the false and colonial histories. I also want to remind that vast deserts separated the 2 parts of Iran, dividing the country into 2 political sections. This geographical issue affected the policies of governments, including the Persian language, which with this movement and the blending of Eastern and Western Iran laid the foundation for the new Persian language. The Ray Road, which means long like ray rice, was part of the Silk Road, establishing communication between the 2 regions. And the continued movement of Iranian Mongols following Moghustan in western Iran, they expanded many cities including Shiraz and Isfahan, and established their governing centers. With their rise to power and their continued movement, they also invaded Russia and India, and before the arrival of Nader Shah Afshar in India, they had a Persian-speaking Mughal rule. They left many influences from Moghustani culture in India. In all of Indian history, the Mongols are considered Iranians, and many of these Moghustani Iranians were responsible for administering India during colonial times, providing extensive services to England, which is worth contemplation and examination. Also in Indian history, the followers of Moghustani are referred to as Moguls, meaning those who are from Mogul